what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Kim. That was wonderful. I got chills as you were singing that. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Debbie Marinsky, the interim dean of the Southern Campus, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to our annual Veterans Day tribute. While it is not November 11th, it is still a special day when we can come together in celebration of our military service members, past and present. It is my hope that today's program will show our veterans and those currently serving how much they matter to our campus, to our community, and to our country. Today's program is to honor those that have protected and defended us, and to those that continue to do so. I don't know if I can truly express how grateful we are for the service and sacrifice of our military members, but I will start with thank you. As we honor the veterans who have served and those who are serving here in the United States and in other countries, who strive diligently each day to keep our nation safe and maintain peace throughout the world, we all say thank you. To all of you in attendance today, your presence here indicates that you regard the recognition of our veterans as something truly worthy of taking time out of your busy day, your professional day, and your personal lives to also say thank you. While it is indeed our privilege to say thank you to all our military members, those words cannot begin to express the extent of our appreciation for their service or sufficiently honor their sacrifices. So I'd like to take a few minutes to recognize all of those who have served our country. If you have served or are currently serving, would you please stand and be recognized? Let's give them a hand, please. I think it is important to also recognize the family members of our veterans and currently serving members who maybe didn't serve in the military, or maybe they did, but certainly have served our nation. So if you are a family member of someone who has served or currently serving, would you please stand and be recognized? I would also like to say how proud I am to be serving a military-friendly campus. The Southern Campus takes so much pride in our military students. So I'd like to recognize our students who are currently serving or those who have served. So if you are a military student, please stand and be recognized. We are so proud of all of you, family, students, and those who have served. So again, I say thank you for all of your service and your sacrifice for us and this great country that we live in. Finally, I would like to thank Dr. Teresa McKenzie, who is our campus coordinator for veteran services, as well as our guest speaker for putting together today's event. I also thank our student services team that also helped to organize today's program. We would not be celebrating and gathering today if not for all of their hard work. So thank you to all of our members of this campus that have put this together. So as we get the program started, my hope is that we never forget the service and sacrifices of the brave men and women who have served our great country so courageously. I believe one of the best ways to never forget is to continue telling the stories of our service members. Today we will hear from Dr. McKenzie, an Air Force veteran and our campus champion for our veterans, the stories of women that have impacted our military and served our nation gallantly. I believe by telling these stories, we are saying we honor you, we thank you, and we will never forget you. I thank you all for attending today, and I hope that you enjoy the program.
Good morning. I have the great honor to introduce our keynote speaker. By the way, I'm Robert Pleasant. I'm the Director of Student Services, and it's an honor to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning. Dr. Teresa McKenzie is an Air Force veteran who served during the Persian Gulf War, where she worked as an inpatient in the psychiatry unit. She currently serves as an Accessibility and Veteran Services Coordinator and an adjunct faculty member here at Ohio University Southern. Dr. McKenzie has worked in higher education for 20-plus years and has spent most of that time working with students from diverse backgrounds. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in psychology from Western Carolina University and her Master's and Doctor of Education degree from Capella University. Dr. McKenzie has facilitated conference workshops and made numerous presentations, including presenting at the Women in the Military Conference at the Huntington VA Medical Center. Please join me in welcoming my colleague and my friend, Dr. Teresa McKenzie.
Am I good? Did we switch mics? Okay. Good morning. So before I get started, I want you to know why this is important to me. But I also want to find out what you know. So do any of you know any women who served in the military? Okay. Excellent. Wow, that's awesome. Does anyone know how long women have been associated with the military? Any guess? Have been associated with the military? How long have women been connected with the military? Huh? World War II? That's a good guess. Wax, yeah. That's right, exactly. So for me, I'm an Air Force veteran. When I went through basic training, I didn't learn about what women did in the military, even specifically the Air Force. I learned how to march. I learned how to survive the confidence course. I learned the chain of command, but I didn't learn, and I learned Air Force history, but I didn't learn about women and what they did in history. So then when I went to leadership school when I was in Germany, I learned how to be a leader in the military. Again, I didn't learn about what women specifically did in the military. So this is important to me because in the last few years I've started to explore what makes me me, my diversity. And my military career is part of my diversity. And I wanted to know who were the badass women who came before me? Because there have to be some, right? So this is important because I'm a woman and I'm a veteran. So the pictures that you see are all of me, even if you can't tell. This is me, and then that's me. So again, in basic training, I didn't learn about what women contributed to the Air Force in terms of Air Force history. I learned about Air Force history. So I'm going to take you on a little journey and show you that women have always, since this country was created and started through battle, been involved with the military in some way, somehow. It started with the Revolutionary War. Women were not military during the Revolutionary War. Well, I take it back. There were some women who were military, but those women who were in disguise. They dressed as men, they fought as men. Some of them were wives and they were following their husbands. This picture is of Margaret Corbin. It's reported, and I don't know how accurate the story is because some people have it different in different places, but she was disguised as a man. And when her husband had failed during battle, she took off her clothes and revealed herself as a woman and took over his role. But while I say women were involved, they weren't necessarily wanted. General Washington didn't want women there at all. He wanted just the men. But he was smart and he realized if the women left, the men would leave. So he made a decision and helped to create legislation that would allow women to be there. So women could stay, but they had to serve certain roles. They were nurses, they were housekeepers, they were cooks, they were seamstress, but that was their role. And they were tag-alongs, basically. They had no official role. So in 1775, I told you they created legislation. This allowed women to serve, but they served only as nurses. So nurses were paid $2 per month to serve. But surgeons had a matron liaison who made $4 a month. And her job was to go between the surgeon and other people. But she made more than the nurses who actually did all the work. By 1777, that changed, and nurses were making $8 a month. But women were there in that capacity. Then we go to the Civil War. We see more involvement with women. Women are still in disguise if they're serving, and they still are trying to be part of the war effort. So women served, they were cooks, they served as spies, because who is going to suspect a woman as being in the military or affiliated with the military, right? So they could go places that men couldn't go. So women served as spies, like soldiers again. The two pictures I have posted on the top, I think most people know Harriet Tubman, right? What I didn't know before I started doing my research was Harriet Tubman was also a Union spy, not just worked with the Underground Railroad, which runs through here. And she also was a volunteer nurse. I didn't know that information either. And she was an unpaid soldier in addition to being a freedom fighter. And the woman on the bottom is Mary Edwards Clark. It says she's an abolitionist and talks about what she did. She was a surgeon. But one of the things it doesn't talk about is if you pay attention to how she's dressed, how is she dressed? Mm-hmm. She was actually in disguise for a long time as a surgeon. And that's how she was able to serve. Later, when it was revealed that she was a woman, she was still allowed to serve because she was a surgeon. She became the first woman to, or it says only, but since then we've had one more. But she was the first woman to receive the Medal of Honor. And it was given to her as a woman, not as the male surgeon that she pretended to be. And then lastly, I just made a note that there were also black nurses serving. And those black nurses were serving on Navy and Confederate, on ships with the Union and the Confederacy. So that's how the Civil War turned out. You see more involvement than with the Revolutionary War, but it's still undercover, menial jobs, nurses caring for people, right? I want you to know about this lady. Her name is Cathay Williams. So there was a movie on Netflix, I think it's called The Harder They Fall, and it portrays a black woman. Her name is Cathay Williams, and it's supposed to be this person. So Cathay Williams was the first African American to enlist in the Army. Now you're gonna go, how did she do that, right? She was in disguise. She joined under the name William Cathay. And she joined the Buffalo Soldiers. So as you can see, this is how people think she probably looked, but they believe this is an actual picture of her. She was served until she revealed her identity in 1868. But in 1893, she, because of her service, she lost all her toes. She had neuralgia, she had diabetes. And so she applied to get disability benefits because she was a veteran, right? The surgeon who examined her denied her, said that she was not eligible and she was not worthy, so she didn't get them. Not long after that, she died, but they don't know exactly when she died. But I want you to know her because she was the first African-American woman to enlist in the military. She had to do it as a man, but she was still the first. Next, we go to World War I. World War I, we see even more women involved in the military effort. And anytime you have questions, please feel free to stop me. I will answer questions if I can. I have my notes up here too, so. But World War I, you see more women involved. And what role do you think women played? I know you can read this, but yeah, they were nurses. And that's what they were looking for. I got to give it to the Navy. I'm not Navy. Any Navy in here? Okay, good, I can talk about you. But the Navy was one of the first ones who said, okay, we'll take women and we'll enlist them and we'll make them part of our service, but they're going to be nurses, right? So the Navy did that. During this Great War, there were 21,498 U.S. Army nurses, and the Navy had 1,476. They served here in the United States, I almost said CONUS, and then overseas. That was their role. That was their need. They were needed as nurses. They weren't needed as anything else. This is a group of black nurses. This was the first time black women actually had an organization or a role that they can claim as theirs, and so that they could actually serve. They were part of the Colored Auxiliary of the American Red Cross. That's how they served. And they would meet soldiers. That's how they were able to serve. There were 8 black nurses. Isn't it sad that I can say 8? But there were 8 black nurses who served as nurses here in the United States. One of the places they served was Ohio. In Ohio and Illinois, they served as nurses for American wounded, African American wounded, and then also for German POWs. And so before this, I didn't realize POWs from Germany came to the United States for care and housing. But that was their role. By the end of this war, 80,000 women had served. So remember, Revolutionary War, very few, right? Then we go to the Civil War, very few. Now we're looking at 80,000 women who have served in the First War. Then we get to World War II. World War II is when we see a huge uptick in women's involvement. Several things happened. What can you tell me about World War II? What happened to change the number of women? Yes. What else? Anything else? One of the things is women went into the workforce because men left, right? You had to replace them. Well, the military realized they needed women there too. because men were on the front fighting. So women had to come in and take over some of the other roles. They had to drive trucks, act as nurses. They needed them to do clerical work. So instead of just being there as a tag along as a nurse, they needed them to fill other roles because the men were needed elsewhere. So during World War II, there were 350,000 women. 350. Now, what did I say about World War I? How many was that? 80. So now we're looking at 350,000 women who are enlisted. Those women served different roles. They were WASP, and I'm going to talk about that again later, and they were WACs, W-A-A-C, and then they were WAC, W-A-C. And I'll tell you about that too. It's amazing the hoops that they jumped through in order to say why women should be there. So those women served in in those areas. They repaired airplanes, and then they were clerical workers. During World War II, over 1,600 women, female soldiers, whatever, airmen, received some kind of commendation. This is, remember the first woman who got the Medal of Honor? Before her, women weren't recognized and honored in that way. World War II saw a difference. Now we're going to honor the women for the work that they did in the war effort. So I told you about WASP, WAC, W-A-A-C, and WAC. So WASP were Women Air Force Service Pilots. This only lasted 2 years, and they had 1,100 elite pilots. These women were tasked with flying airplanes from factories to bases. Some saw some service overseas, but not very many, because there was a limit on where women could serve at that point. I know I have sarcasm, but snark is my thing, so y'all just gonna have to bear with me. And some were killed and some were captured as prisoners of war. Now, could I find some of their names? No. But some were captured and some were killed. It lasted for 2 years. Why do you think it ended after 2 years? Men were now trained to do this, so there was no longer a need for these women, right? So, next is WAAC, the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. When you hear the word auxiliary, what do you think? Unpaid. Anything else? So the WAAC, they were unpaid. They were all volunteers. Also, WASP were volunteers. I found that out too. It wasn't until 1977 that WASP were recognized for their military service and actually called veterans. And then in 2010, they received a medal. But before that, they were volunteer. So while it was 350,000 women enlisted, the majority of them were volunteer, which meant they didn't get paid. But then we have the WAC, W-A-C. This happened because there was a need for a change. So as the war is ending, the Army realizes that all these women that they've trained are now going to leave. And they want these women to stay because, hey, they can fly, they can drive trucks, they can do clerical work, they can be more than nurses. And the Navy starts talking to our legislators saying, we need to figure out a way to keep these women. So then they came up with the Women's Army Corps. The women in the Women's Army Corps weren't just Army, they were Air Force too. But this is a way to make them a permanent part of the Army or the military. And when they did this, that meant they could get paid. Now, when they got paid, if they were stateside, they made the exact same amount that the men made, right? If they went overseas, they did not. Also, they were not entitled to death insurance if they were to die at that point. So if they died, their parents didn't get death insurance at that point. So while we came a long way from Revolutionary War, we're still at the point where women can get paid the same stateside, but not overseas. And if they die, nobody gets insurance. So we still have some work to do in terms of women in the military. Yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, currently I get benefits. And no, at that time, women were not entitled, or the families were not entitled to get the death gratuity that the men received when they were killed. It is. So also during World War II, I have more information about World War II because during World War II, women and their roles boomed. I mean, the things that they could do, the places they could go, it just was amazing. So this is the 688th Battalion. They are an elite, and I say elite because, again, badass. These women were the first and only all-black female battalion in Europe. Their job was to clear out the backlog of mail. I don't know who had it before, but this was their job. So during their time in Europe, they actually did that. They delivered over 7 million pieces of mail, or mail to over 7 million soldiers during World War II. That's huge, right? 7 million. All black, all female battalion. That was what they did. There are lots of documentaries about this group. There's some who are still alive, the 688. One, I think, just turned 108, I think. President Obama, I think, honored them, but there are documentaries out there. They actually have a website. Again, these women were amazing. And I'm bringing them up because not only they were amazing, but we have a connection here. Their commander was a black woman from Dayton, Ohio. She was, and let me make sure I say this right, Charity Adams Early, and she was the first African-American commissioned officer in the Women's Army Corps. Awesome, right? So you heard me talk about Ohio, right? We have all kinds of connections here. This is Mae Clark. You've never heard her name, I'm absolutely certain of it. Mae Clark is the first African American to enlist in the military from Kentucky. What's significant about her is not just that she was the first one, is what she did while she was in. She was also a commissioned officer. And she was the first black WAC, so see, W-A-A-C, this is before WAC, W-A-C. So that meant she was volunteer. She didn't have benefits. She wasn't really military, right? She was assigned to command an all-white platoon. Before that, that had never happened. She was also instrumental in starting desegregation of military bases. When she was at, this light is burning me up. When she was at Douglas Airfield in Arizona, she noticed that to go to the base theater, and those in the military who are on bases, you know what base theater is like, right? She noticed that it was segregated. And she didn't feel that was right. It shouldn't be segregated. I mean, we're all the same soldiers. We should all be able to go. And so she started a fight to desegregate it. The base commander got wind of this and decided, you know, she's right. And so the base commander sent out a brief, a statement that the base would be desegregated. This helped to get to the place where eventually it was desegregated in 1948, all the bases, but she is the one who started it. Unfortunately, she died on that base. She had a ruptured appendix, and medical care at that time didn't get it and didn't save her. But I just want you to know her name, Mae Clark from Kentucky. Then we have, who knows this person? This is Garnet Keffer Kimberlin. We know her because her daughter sang the national anthem. Her niece sang the national anthem today. Dr. Keffer's aunt, Garnet, served in World War II. Now, you know, I keep saying badass, and I said I wasn't going to say that, but I keep saying it over and over. But I just need to point out, women soldiers are badass. This woman was a nurse. She served in World War II. She was one of the first group of women to land at Normandy. So we know Normandy, right? Normandy, this woman, right? And then served at the Battle of the Bulge. But what's intriguing to me is that she was also there to help liberate Buchenwald. Does anybody know what Buchenwald is? Buchenwald is a concentration camp in Germany. B-U-C-H-W-A-L-D. Buchenwald is one of the concentration camps in Germany, and there were Jewish prisoners there. This is fascinating to me because when I was traveling over Europe, when I was stationed there, I actually visited this concentration camp and found out that the city that was below it, named Weimar, they said they didn't know what was going on there. It was a short drive to Buchenwald, but they said they didn't know. So she was one of the ones to help liberate this concentration camp. And so for that, I thank her, but I thank her for her service because without these women, I wouldn't be standing here talking about my military service and the history of women in the military. Then 1948. 1948 was a huge year, not just for women, but for African Americans. In 1948, Congress passed the Women's Armed Service Integration Act, which granted women permanent status in the military, entitling them to benefits. Before that, remember, if they died, the family got nothing. They didn't get benefits. They couldn't apply for benefits and get benefits if they were disabled. So in 1948, that changed. And then also in July 1948, President Truman signed Executive Order 9981, which desegregated all the military bases, which was awesome. So 1948 is a really good year. The Korean War. This is the first war since the Revolutionary War where blacks and whites fought together in the same units. Awesome, right? And the pictures you see here are, this is an Army nurse, Captain Eleanor York. She actually was on a ship with over 4,000 men, and they treated her like a queen. And I include it because I love her smile. And the fact that she was a nurse during the Korean War, and she had to come back to the States. They put her on this ship, and it was awesome. But also, there were 120,000 women served in the military. And how many of them were nurses? Approximately 1/3 of those. This is one of the earlier wars where women were able to go overseas too, but they don't talk about their injuries. But we did have a lot to go overseas. I think that's it for the Korean War. Next, I'm going to talk about Vietnam. Vietnam, I could not find numbers for all the women that served during Vietnam, but I did find that 11,000 women actually went to Vietnam, which was huge because before that, remember, women weren't allowed really to go overseas. We had 6,888 that went to Germany or Europe to clear up the backlog of mail, but in terms of going over into a combat zone or combat areas, women weren't allowed to do that. So the Vietnam War is the start of us being more involved. There were 8 women killed in combat, and this is Commander Elizabeth Barrett. She became the first woman to hold a command in a combat zone. Huge, right? So I jump here because a lot of things happened, but a lot of things I just want to mention. So in 1967, now think about this, in 1967, promotions for women to ranks of general were opened. 1967. Could not be a general. Not a 1-star, not a 4-star, not any stars. And also flag ranks. In 1972, women were finally allowed to command units that had men in them. Before that, they could only command units that had women. In 76, women are finally admitted to our military academies. So before that, no women were attending West Point. No women were attending the Naval Academy. No women were attending the Air Force Academy. Before that, they just couldn't attend. They were not allowed. And then in 1978, women in the Navy and the Marines were allowed to serve on non-combat ships as technicians, nurses, and officers. So we've come a long way, right? More change happens. Again, without a war, there's not a whole lot of information, but things kept happening. It didn't just end when the war ended. Women kept doing things and kept pushing. And also, the military, by then, they're pretty smart. The commanders realized, all of these women are doing amazing things. We really need to work on ways to keep them. So that's why you see more things happening. In 1991, Congress said that women could fly in combat missions. Before that, remember the WASP? They weren't allowed to fly combat missions. That doesn't mean they didn't. They just were not legally allowed to do it. In 1993, Congress authorized women to serve on combat ships. Now remember when I said during the Civil War, there were black nurses on Union and Confederate Navy ships? I'm pretty sure those were combat ships, but they weren't legally supposed to be there, right? And in 1988, for the first time, women fighter pilots fly combat missions off aircraft carriers into Operation Desert Fox. So Operation Desert Storm was the big mission. Desert Fox was a targeted strategic mission where they were targeting specific targets, and they were actually firing and shooting and getting these targets. They were allowed to do that during Operation Desert Fox. Then we have Operation Desert Storm. Operation Desert Storm is the one that I served during, me and my husband. Wave, honey. I was in Germany, so I didn't go into Iraq, but I served, because I worked in the hospital, I served the patients who came back from there. So this is the first war that you see more women in combat zones. There were 41,000 women deployed to this combat zone war. 41,000 in a combat zone. Remember, they couldn't serve in combat zones, and now there's 41,000 of them. And this right here, I just want you to know, again, women are bad. Y'all just don't know. Women are bad. This is Lieutenant Phoebe Jeter. She commanded headed an all-male platoon and ordered 13 Patriot missiles fired and destroyed at least 2 Scud missiles. She is the first and only woman to shoot down a Scud missile. Right? So women are bad, right? So this is another one. Okay, so she excites me. This is Sergeant Leanne Hester. Now, when I say women are bad, this woman here is what you need to see and think about. So she is the first woman to be awarded the Silver Star for combat action. Think about that. The first one for combat action. What she did is her role was to scan and clear the route for a supply convoy. So in the process of doing this near Baghdad, her unit was ambushed. But what she did next is why I say she's bad. She led the fight, and then when she was doing the directing fire and telling the unit and other troops what to do, and then she began fighting on foot. Because of her, she by herself killed at least 3 enemy combatants at close range. So what does that mean, close range? Close enough to see their face, that's right. And then resulting in every member of her unit surviving. Every single one. So when I say bad, think of her, right? So we're getting ready to go to look at like the war in Iraq. So I think you've seen these faces before, heard about them. At the top is Shoshana Johnson. Do you remember her being a POW? Do you remember when she came back, the pictures of her? Tim, yes. Next is Lori Paistua. She was the first Native American killed in combat. And then finally, I don't know if you can see, oops. This is, I just lost her name, Jessica Lynch. Where is she from? So we had somebody from Kentucky, right? Garnet. Well, yeah, we'll say Kentucky for her too, right? And then we had Mae Clark, and then we had somebody from Ohio, and then somebody from West Virginia. So while this is Appalachia, we have some bad women. They handle their business. They know what they're doing. These women did something that a lot of women haven't done. They were captured as POWs. Lori Paistua didn't make it back, but the other 2 did. I know that Jessica Lynch ended up going to college. It wasn't ours, so I'm not going to say the name of it, and she used GI Bill to get her degree. But I want you to know that we have a connection to women who do great things in the military, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing this whole presentation. During the war in Iraq, Almost 300,000 women served across both Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom in Iraq and Afghanistan. So we went from, 41,000 in combat to now 300,000. I want you to know this lady too. This is First Lieutenant Emily Jasmine Tatum Perez. She was killed in action. She is the first African American to hold the highest rank of a female cadet at West Point. Now remember, women couldn't go to West Point? Now we have somebody who has that highest rank. That means she ranked higher than the male cadets. She was the first African American officer killed in a U.S. military history due to die in combat. And unfortunately, she was very young. You see 1983 to 2006. But she did what she had to do because she had to. And that's what we do in the military. When we raise our hand, we swear to protect and defend. She did that. There are more changes. So these women, oh my gosh, this is a Lioness team. They are amazing. The Marines have an all-female engagement team. I see Ernie shaking his head. They're called the Lionesses. They go in and do things that sometimes men are afraid to do, but that's their job. So I want you to know that while women are doing their thing and we are serving and we are being nurses and clerks and all these things, we're also heading up elite units to go in where no one else can go. Also, I want you to know in 2013, women were no longer banned from serving in active combat zones. Now, if you paid attention to what I said, you know we've always been in those zones. We just are now allowed to do it. Since the first women completed Army Ranger School, 100 women have completed Army Ranger School. What is Army Ranger School? My Army people. What is it? Like Special Forces, right? So we've had 100. Women have also completed the Navy SEAL Officer Assessment and Selection process. Another thing I want you to know is, remember women could not attain ranks of general? Remember that? And now they could? I searched and searched, but there are no 5-star women in any branches. This is Admiral Michelle Howard. She is the first woman to become a 4-star admiral in the Navy. Air Force has 4-star women, Navy, Army does too, but this is the first one for the Navy. And I bring her up because she's also an African-American woman. So I want you to know who she is. This woman is retired now, but do you realize what she had to do to get to that point? Can you see her? Then, 2016, Department of Defense opened doors to combat jobs for women with no exceptions. Notice I say with no exceptions. While women could go into combat zones, there were exceptions to places they could go. In 2016, that changed. And then Air Force General Lori Robinson became the first woman to lead a unified combat command. And then in 2016, we also had the first woman soldiers to join the 75th Ranger Regiment. And then we had Captain Kristen Grist became the Army's first infantry officer, and Sergeant Shelby Atkins became the first female enlisted infantry soldier. So why do you think that's significant? Y'all are so quiet, just like my class. Why is that important? Teresa. See, I know your name, so I'm going to call you.
They were never allowed before, so this is a huge move for women.
Yeah, absolutely. In 2017, these 3 women became the first female infantry Marines. Now, how huge is that, Ernie? That's huge, right?
It's a big deal.
Yep. Look at them. When you think bad, what do you think? You think this? Yeah, 5 years ago, right? More recent first, in 2019, and this is her, Captain Shana Koss became the first woman to lead the Army Rangers during a deployment. Okay, so 2019, the first time, right? And then in 2021, the first female to graduate from the Army Sniper School graduated. They did not release her name, but we did have one. These are my sources. I had fun learning this information. I am proud to know that I am part of this history, and I hope to keep sharing it. I hope people learn something. I hope it motivates you to go out and learn more too, because we women, we don't get our due all the time. So, and also, before I finish, I want to have my sisters in arms stand up, women veterans. Thank you both for your service. So thank you. Any questions, comments? Okay. The nurses? No, nurses earn $2 a month. The matrons got $4, and then by 1777 they got $8 a month. Mm-hmm. I didn't find that information. 1777. If you're a woman and you're making $8 a month, I'm thinking that's pretty good for a woman. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we don't know. I don't know what men made, because if they were actually paid. Excellent point. Anybody else? Well, thank you for taking the time to listen to me and let me go on about my badass female sisters in arms.
Well, there's more than 2 of 3. Well, there's really actually more than 3 now, but we began a quilt guild, and Kim was responsible for getting it started, because we love quilting, and once you make so many quilts, what do you do with them? And you give them to your family, and you give them to your friends, and you still like making them, and it stimulates the creative side of you, but there's a greater purpose. And so Kim's aunt, you saw her, Garnet, on the screen. No, actually, it started with Rick, Mickey Crawford's husband. No. You know how it started. Tell how it started.
My aunt was, as she said, included in the presentation. And one day someone on Facebook posted and said, didn't you have a female family member who was in World War II? And they asked this of another relative, and she said, yes, but I can't tell you anything about her, and I'm never shy. So I hopped in and said, well, I can. She got 5 battle stars, she did this, and they said, well, we have a quilting guild where we award quilts to veterans. And I said, well, unfortunately, she now lives in California, so. And they said, oh, that doesn't matter. And in 2 weeks, my aunt called me and said, I just got noticed that I'm being presented a quilt. And it was the first real recognition that she had ever received for the work that she did. So I contacted the Quilting Guild in Carter County, because they were the ones who had started that process. And I said, I want to help. I'd like to make a donation. They said, we won't turn down your money, but what we want you to do is make quilts. And I said, I don't sew. And they said, it's not that hard, learn. So I did, and we decided that that was really a cool thing to do. So the first quilt that I awarded was to Dr. Mickey Crawford's husband, who had served in Vietnam. And those of you, maybe you don't know Rick, but if you do, he is the standard Vietnam veteran personality. He doesn't talk about it, he doesn't address it, and he is still a leatherneck at heart. But when he got that quilt, he smiled from ear to ear, and the man who never likes to have his picture taken, said, quick, get my picture with Kim and my quilt. And, I was just hooked. And so we began making quilts. And since then, we, as part of the Quilt of Valor Foundation, have awarded several quilts to local individuals. And today, we get to do that again, and we get to do it for one of our own. So, Ernie, would you come forward, please?
The woman who established the organization, and I urge you that while you're looking up some of Teresa's women on the internet, step over to the QOV.org website, and you'll see why she did it. But she started an organization because no one goes into the service and comes out the same person. In education, we call it schemata. Your experiences influence who you are. And the military is known for its rigor and its structure, and it changes people. And so you join the military, make sacrifices, and then you come back into your regular life. And what the founder of this organization wanted to do was we know quilts are a symbol of a loving practice. And so she wanted to wrap the quilt around the recipient so that they would feel the love of the creator, the person that created the quilt. And so that's what we'd like to do now, is we're going to show it to Ernie first. And I think he's seen it because Mickey and Kim and I made it together, and he said he wanted the quilt that we all made together. And then we want to wrap it around you.
I'm going to cry.
It's okay. It's okay. Okay, this way. Sorry.
Welcome
and
home.
We want you to feel loved and feel appreciated, because we recognize that you've made sacrifices to serve us. You changed your life, and you're willing to change your life to make our lives better and preserve the freedom that we appreciate. And we're so grateful to you for being willing to do that.
So thank you for your service, and welcome home.
And if you have anything you'd like to say, you're welcome to do so now. And we also have this for you to stick in your house. It has our notation for you on it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I want to get a picture.
Oh. Is there anything you want to say? Well, this is yours. Oh, you're quite welcome.
I love that ceremony. Every time I get a chance to witness it, I love it. So we are so honored that you all came out for this hour just to show your support, show our appreciation to our veterans, those who have served and are currently serving, into their families. We can never forget, freedom isn't free. It takes sacrifice. And so to all those who have served and are serving, thank you for making those sacrifices. Thank you to the families. Dr. McKenzie, you're a badass too. I like that, you know? The Material Hugs Quilting Guild, thank you for your service and honoring our veterans. To all who took part in this program, thank you. Thank you for organizing it. To Student Services staff, those who have prepared refreshments, thank you, and thank all of you for being here. Now, there are refreshments out in the lobby. If you don't take them, I have to eat them all, so we do not want that. So thank you for being here. Enjoy the refreshments in the lobby. Thank you. Oh, by the way, we do have our military wall, our tribute wall out front there. Please take a look at that. And if you have any questions about the wall, make sure you get in contact with Dr. McKenzie. But we have photos of our students, their families, and anyone who's associated with the campus. Their photos are out there on the wall. So,
If you are an Ohio graduate, Teresa, And I don't have your picture. I'd like to have it. If you have family members who you want to show your appreciation for, we will keep adding every day until I take it down on the 14th. So send me those pictures. If you are affiliated in any way whatsoever with Ohio University, we'd love to have your photo or your family members' photos on that wall.
Thank you. Enjoy the refreshments.